The engine coughed once, then sputtered into silence under the blazing afternoon sun. Sweat dripped down my forehead as I wiped the grease off my hands, fully believing I'd just finished the very last favor I'd ever do for the family that once broke my heart. I thought fixing that old sedan would be simple. Tighten a few bolts, replace a worn-out belt, shake hands, and drive away for good. But just as I turned toward my truck, a quiet voice behind me stopped me colder than any winter wind ever could. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was barely above a whisper. "What about me?" Those 3 words held years of loneliness, regret, and a quiet kind of pain that no broken engine could ever explain. The summer afternoon was warm, and the whole neighborhood was shimmering under the bright sunlight. Honestly, I'd almost ignored the call that came in that morning. My relationship with Marin had ended nearly 3 years ago. It didn't end with screaming or betrayal. It just collapsed under the weight of misunderstandings, pride, and 2 people who gave up on each other before they actually stopped loving each other. Since then, I'd built a peaceful life working as an independent mechanic, keeping my head down, and staying far away from anything connected to my past. So when an unfamiliar number popped up on my screen, I almost let it ring out, but I picked up, only to hear the soft, familiar voice of Marin's mom, Celeste. She sounded embarrassed to even ask. Her car had broken down in the driveway. Every shop in town was booked for days, and she admitted she remembered how much I used to love fixing cars. She also said she'd completely understand if I said no. There wasn't a trace of anger in her voice, just pure humility. Against my better judgment, I told her I'd swing by. Driving over felt like opening a chapter I'd worked so hard to close. Every familiar street brought back memories of holidays, backyard cookouts, and afternoons when I genuinely thought I'd be part of that family forever. When I pulled up, Celeste greeted me with the same gentle smile I remembered, though time had added a few new lines around her eyes. The house felt so much quieter than before. Flowers still lined the porch, but a lot of them had wilted in the heat. The laughter that used to fill the yard was replaced by this heavy, uncomfortable silence. The issue with the sedan was easy enough to spot. A cracked serpentine belt had messed up a pulley, keeping the engine from starting. Luckily, I had the spare parts in my truck. As I worked under the hood, Celeste stayed close by, offering iced tea and thanking me way more than she needed to. She watched with this quiet attention, not because she cared about engines, but because I think she just really appreciated having someone around. The repair took about 2 hours. Sunlight washed over the driveway while birds chirped in the trees and kids laughed down the block. It was the kind of peaceful afternoon that usually makes you glad to be alive. Yet the house itself felt strangely heavy. When I finished, the engine turned over perfectly, purring smoothly for the first time in months. Celeste smiled with genuine relief and insisted on paying me. I refused, but she pushed again. I just smiled and told her that after everything she'd done for me years ago, like feeding me countless dinners when I was a broke college kid, we were way more than even. For the first time that day, tears filled her eyes. I packed up my tools, shut the box, and started walking back to my truck. My job was done. My past could stay in the past. Then came the whisper. "What about me?" I turned around slowly. She wasn't talking about the car. She was standing on the porch, holding onto the railing as if she needed it to hold up more than just her weight. Without saying much else, she invited me inside for coffee. The living room felt smaller than I remembered. Family photos still lined the shelves, but a few frames were missing, leaving faded spots on the walls. Life had clearly changed here. Over coffee, Celeste finally told me what happened after Marin and I split up. Her husband had passed away the year before after a short illness. Marin had taken a job overseas and rarely had time to visit. Friends had drifted off, neighbors had moved, and the lively home she once had was now painfully quiet. She admitted that some mornings, she'd start the car for no reason at all, just to hear something other than the silence. She apologized for calling me out when she could have just waited for a shop. The truth was, she confessed, she just missed having someone sit across the table and treat her like she still mattered. Her honesty hit me harder than any heartbreak ever could. Loneliness doesn't always make a scene. Sometimes it hides behind polite smiles, neatly folded laundry, and well-kept gardens. Sometimes it sounds like someone asking for help with a broken car when all they're really trying to fix is a broken day. Over the next few weeks, I found myself dropping by every Saturday afternoon. Sometimes I changed light bulbs, sometimes I cleaned out the gutters, and sometimes nothing needed fixing at all. We'd just eat lunch together. She told me stories about growing up in a small farming town, raising her daughter, losing her husband, and how grief never really leaves. It just gets quieter over time. In return, I opened up about my own struggles. I admitted I'd blamed myself for the breakup way longer than I should have, and how hard it had been to trust people again. Bit by bit, neither of us felt quite so alone. One sunny afternoon, a few neighbors saw us out front planting flowers together. The following weekend, one neighbor stopped by with a homemade pie. Another offered to mow the lawn. Before long, Saturday afternoons turned into neighborhood hangouts instead of quiet, lonely days. Kindness had a funny way of spreading. Months later, Marin came back for a quick visit. She saw her mom laughing in the garden, surrounded by neighbors, smiling brighter than she had in years. There was no big dramatic movie scene between Marin and me, no rekindled romance, no fairy tale ending. Just two people who had finally forgiven each other enough to share a real, genuine smile. Before she left town again, Marin thanked me. She said her mom talked about those Saturday visits all the time. Not because I fixed her car, but because someone had reminded her that she hadn't been forgotten. That sentence stayed with me long after everyone went home. Sometimes the best thing we can fix for someone isn't mechanical at all. It's just showing up. It's staying an extra 5 minutes, asking one more question, and listening without being in a rush. That old sedan still drives through town every week. And every time I see it pass by, I can't help but smile, knowing that one small act of kindness repaired so much more than an engine ever could.